Okay, so I've got Komodo open and it's ready to go. I need to, I'm also going to use Git and GitHub so you can see that process as well. So I'll start with my GitHub account and I will make a GitHub repository, and then I will sort of make a new Rails project on my local machine, which I will then in turn link to my GitHub repository. So I made one for the other class today. This one's simple store and their section number from learn. I'll do the same sort of thing for us. I'll say simple store, and we are 6.2. Simple Rails store for a demo WebD 2000 winter 2014. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as a public repository, and I'm not initializing it with any content, so I'm just going to say create repository, and this now gives me my instructions on how I can either set up a new local repository or connect an existing repository. And I have the option of setting it up either by HTTP or SSH. For you probably have used HTTP as your remote up to this point, and what it does then is it asks you for a username and password when you're doing things like pushing. You'll see me using SSH, and that's the reason is that I'm not going to be asked for username and passwords. I've set up with my GitHub account a set of public-private cryptographic keys, and they uniquely identify this machine as being something that belongs to my GitHub account. And that way I don't have to enter my username and password every time. If you want to do the same, just go on GitHub and sort of look in the help section for SSH keys, and it will give you an explanation. There's a tutorial for doing it in Windows, one for Mac, one for Linux, and so you can do it on any OS, and you can set it up in this way. Okay, so I'm good to go. I need to go create a new folder for this. So I'm going to go into my Rails projects folder, and I'll actually just open a command prompt in this folder. And from here I'll say Rails new, and I'm going to name the project after my repository, although that's not a requirement. I'm just going to make them match. Simple store 9142 or 62. So the Rails command now is going to create all the files and folders that are required for a default Rails application. It then runs the bundler app to ensure that I have all the gems that I need installed, which I should at this point because I've done this a few times already. I can now navigate to that folder. Oops. Simple store, and then that. And now I'm going to do the Git initialization stuff. I get some of these instructions here. This is assuming I'm not starting with a Rails project, but I am, so I'm sort of pick and choose which ones I'm going to do. I'm going to do the init. I'll do an add, but instead of just adding a README, I'll add all the files. Then I'll commit, and then I'll add my remote, and then I'll push. So Git init is going to initialize this as a Git repository. If I do a Git status, I'll get to see the fact that none of my files or folders in my system are currently being tracked. It's sort of hard to read those, but that's in red. It's basically listing the files and folders that it has not yet been made aware of. Git add dot is sort of the wildcard add. That'll add everything. These errors that are popping up here, I think I've made a configuration change to my Git to warn me about line endings, because I often go back and forth between Windows and Linux, and the file types use two different types of line endings. So I'm just being warned here about that. And now I can commit that, and I'll just say initial commit of a default Rails project. Git push -u origin master. The -u makes it so that I don't have to type origin master again. So that way I can just type git push, and it won't. It'll know to push to the origin from my master branch. Oh, but I haven't set up my repository yet. I actually have to set up that remote like this. Oops, like this. Git remote add, and then the thing called origin, which I was trying to push to before I had it yet set up, and then this SSH git repository. Now the push will do what I want it to do. Notice again, it didn't ask me for my username and password. That's because I got authenticated using SSH. Reload, and there's my first commit. You can see my commit message, and if I click here, I can see all the changes, which at this point would be everything. This is all the new lines that were added to my project, all the new files and lines within those files. Okay, so we want a model for a product, and through that, a migration for our database table. And so I'm going to generate that from the command line. So I'll run Rails G for generate, and instead of typing scaffold, that would give me everything, the model, the view, and the controller. I'm just going to type model. The product is the name of the model, and then a title, which is a string, a description, which is text, and a price, which is decimal, and a stock quantity, which is an integer. And that's going to create in my app models folder a product.rb, which will be my active record object, and it'll also generate the migration, which is going to be the description of my database table. So I can open both of those up to take a look at them. So in the app models folder, I have this fairly empty class, which inherits from active record base. We can put things like validations in here. In my DB folder, there's a migrate folder within there. And this is my first migration, which describes the change that I'm about to make to my database, which is that I want a table created called products, which is going to have these columns that I have described at the command prompt, plus the timestamps that created at and updated at timestamps. At this point, we could, before we run the migration, we could add things to this. So if we were thinking about adding things like database level constraints to specify different constraints on, say, the string lengths or the types of data that's going to be allowed in our database, we could add them here. We could also add things like indices. We can edit this file before we run it, and we run it by way of the rake command. So rake db migrate is what's going to look into my migrations folder and run any outstanding migration. So the first time I run it, it's going to run this create products migration. If I was then to run this command again, it wouldn't do anything because it's going to recognize the fact that my migration has already been run. So it only runs outstanding migrations. So if I tried to run it again, it's not like it'll retry to create that table. It's just going to detect that it has no further migrations to actually run. You can also use the db migrate command once you have a number of migrations that describe changes that have been made to your database all along. You can use it to sort of step forward or backwards in time. So if I realized just now, say maybe I had a typo in one of these tables and I wanted to sort of start from scratch, I could step back to version 0. That's all caps, version equals 0 after rake db migrate. That would undo that migration. So stepping me back in time, I could then make a quick change to my migration file and I could continue on from there. I'm not going to bother with that though. Okay, so I now have a products table which exists. If I wanted to interact with the active record object and class that are linked to that particular table, I could enter my Rails console here by typing Rails C. Usually when I'm working on Rails, I'll have 3 different command prompt windows open. One command prompt window open with the console activated, one command prompt window running my server, and one command prompt window just there for typing Git and Rails commands. So 3 different consoles usually running at any given time. The console is an interactive Ruby prompt. I can type in, Ruby code or math and have it execute. But I can also go to, for example, my product and ask it for the count, and it'll do like a select count and tell me I have 0 products in my database. I could, at this point, create a product. I could say, here's a product called goat cheese, and I could give it a description. Tasty cheese made from goat milk, and I could give it a price, let's say $3.45, and a stock quantity, some of those. And now if I do a product.count, I have 1 product in my database. So from the console, I have direct access not only to my active record objects, but through them to my database. So I can add products here. It's nice to put a couple products into my database so that when I start to implement the controller, I'll have something to work with, and I can start with reading, which is generally easier than the rest of the tasks that the controller is in charge of. So I'll add a second product, and we can be okay with that being enough. So I'll just make 1 for goat milk and 1 for goat cheese and cow cheese. Okay. And now I'm told that I have 2 different rows in my products table. That's good. Okay, I'll open up my other console windows now just so I'm going to have access to them. So from inside of my Rails projects folder, I'm going to open up 2 more of these windows, one of which I will start the Rails server on. Notice in most cases I use the shortened form. So for the console, I say Rails C. For the server, I say Rails S. For the generator, I say Rails G. You can type it all out if it helps you to remember them. So you can run Rails server, Rails console, Rails generate. But I tend to just use the shortened terms. So now my server's running. And from this command prompt, I'm about ready for another commit on my Git. And so git status shows me the files that have not yet been committed to my repository. Git diff is going to show me nothing at this point. So I have to compare it with my head, but I'll add these changes in, and I'll commit them just saying generated a product model and ran the associated migration. And git push will push that to GitHub. I don't have to pair every commit with a push. I can continually just sort of add commit, add commit, add commit, and all of my commits can be done locally. And then at the end of every day, or however long I've decided, I can do a push then, and it'll sort of wrap up all of the commits and push them to GitHub. I tend to do it sort of in a synchronized way where I commit then push, but it's not required. So even if you don't have an internet access, you can be working and committing, and then when you do go back and have internet access, you can push all of those commits to your remote. Okay, so there's a few more files I'm going to want to work with. My server's up and running, so I can at least test it. I can go to localhost. It runs by default on port 3000. And by default, the root is just going to be this welcome page. Okay, that's good. I'm going to want to replace this root with sort of a product listing page, and we'll do that in a moment. But to do that, I'm going to need to create a controller, because I need the way Rails is going to work is URLs are going to be mapped to particular controller actions, and right now I don't have a controller action to map anything to. So I want a products controller, a controller that's going to be related with the products database table and the product model that I already have access to. And so I'm going to generate a controller. It's going to be, I want a products controller, so I want a controller called products. I'm going to generate it from the command prompt by saying Rails G generate controller products. If I do that at the command prompt, I'll get an empty controller in the app controllers folder. If I specify other arguments here, they each become actions that will appear inside of my controller, and they will also be made to be views. And so I already know what I need for this controller just because I know what scaffolding would have built for me. And so what scaffolding would have built for me was the following actions. So scaffolding will have built an index action to show all products, and this would have an associated view. So I'll just say view yes. Or maybe even I could specify that the view would be in the app views products folder, and it would be called index.html.erb. The index action has an index view. It's just named the same. There will also be a show action, and it will be for showing one product, and it's going to have a view which will be in the app views products show.html.erb file. That is, if we're thinking about sort of CRUD tasks, create, read, update, and destroy, these are our two reading tasks. For creation, we have a pair of actions that are going to work together. The new action is going to show a HTML form, specifically a form that will allow us to enter details about a new product. And there's going to be a view associated with it, which will be the new .html.erb file. And when you click the button that's going to be on that form, it's going to post that form data to a create action. And so it's a pair of actions. This is going to actually create the new product. I'll space this a bit along. And there's no view for the create action, and we'll see why when we get to that. But it's not going to require an actual view in and of itself. If the creation goes well, I'm just going to have it redirect back to the index to show us the list of products that exist in the system. So that's create and read. Update, just like creation, is a two-step process. So there's an edit action, which is going to show a HTML form as well. But this time, this form is going to be populated with the data that we're editing. And there'll be a view for that. It'll be in the app views products edit.html.erb file. And when it gets posted, it's going to post to an update action, which is going to update a product by way of active record. And again, there's going to be no view required for that one. And lastly, there's a destroy action, which is going to be in charge of deleting a particular product. Delete a product. And view, no view for this one either. So those are the actions. We also need to be able to route to these actions. We need to be able to map particular URLs to take us to these actions, so that when I go to a URL inside of my web browser, it executes some of these actions. And so, for example, I would like my index action to be loaded up when I go to /products. I'll space these out better in a moment. The show, I want to be able to go to /products/ some numeric identifier. So this is going to be the URL that's going to take me to show. And I'm just putting this symbol in as a placeholder for the identifier that would be in the URL. New, I'm going to get there by way of products/new. Create. This is going to look a little weird, and we'll explain it in a moment. Create is going to /products, just like the index was. Maybe I'll take away these trailing slashes. Edit is going to be found at product/id/edit. Space this out again. Because it needs an identifier in the URL, because we have to sort of know which of the products we're actually editing. Update product/id and destroy product/id. So these basically here are URIs or URLs. Right here are my actions. This is just the description, and this is the associated view. But I have certain URIs that are serving multiple purposes, right? I have /products. I've said that's associated with the index action, but it's also associated with the create action. And then I have like both update and destroy and show all sort of being associated with the same URL as well. This is when different HTTP verbs come into play. So up to this point, when you've been working with HTTP, if you even think back to your web development class, we worked with two primary verbs. They were get and post. And so get was when you were typing in a command or a URL directly into the URL bar, or if you were clicking on a link, that was a get request. And if you were posting a form, as long as the form's method was set to post, well, that would be the post command. But there's actually other HTTP verbs that are supported by HTTP, and we actually use all of them in our sort of Rails application. So the distinction, for example, between the index and the create is the verb that's going to be used with it. And so if we do a get request to /products, it's going to show this index action. But if we do a post request to the /products, it's going to do the create action. So the verb that's used with the URL is going to distinguish between which action actually is going to get invoked by Rails in and of itself. Show is going to be a get. New is going to be a get. In Rails 4, I believe, I know edit is a get, and I believe update is a patch. It used to be a put, and now I think it's a patch. And delete is going to be a delete. So I'll just sort of, again, line these sort of all up so that we have something that looks like a table. And so this is what I hope to sort of create, maybe not by the end of today's class, but by the end of having sort of a working system here. All those things. And this is what scaffolding builds for us, right? Scaffolding builds all of these actions, all of these views, and routes out all of these routes for us automatically. We're going to do that manually here, though, instead. Now that I have a list of the actions, I can add those to my generator for my products here. So I'm going to do a Rails G controller products where I want an index action, a show, a new, a create, an edit, an update, and a destroy. By passing all of those to my generator, it's going to create method stubs in the controller so that they'll just be waiting for code to go into them, and it'll also create views for all of them, and then I'll have to go in and just delete the 3 views where I don't need them. So back over here, I can paste in that command, Rails generate controller products with all of the associated actions. I'll give it a moment, and then I can go to the views folder and delete the views that I don't need. I don't need the destroy view, I don't need the create view, and I don't need the update view. So those get deleted. I can now open all these views up inside of Komodo, and I can open up the controller, which was created as well. So notice the controller has all of those methods because I specified them at the command prompt. The controller inherits from something called application controller, and application controller is actually in this folder too. For the most part, we leave this file alone, but the nice thing with this file is that it's the file that we inherit action controller base from. So just like with our active record files, they all inherit from active record base. And that sort of gives our classes model type properties. All of our controllers inherit through active record base. Gotta make this bigger. They inherit through active record base this action controller base, and that gives it sort of controller type properties. But it also is a place, because all controllers inherit from active record base, we could put stuff in here that's sort of common code. And so if you have like this middle ground, every controller is going to inherit from active record base. You can put stuff in there that all controllers have in common. We'll see that later on in the course. Okay. The last file I need to open up is my routing file, because that's how I described to Rails how these actions are actually going to be invoked. And so if I go to my config folder and I load up the routes.rb file, we'll see that Rails built for me a bunch of default routes, and I'm going to delete them all and I'll build them up myself. And I'm going to start with this first one here. I want to be able to show all products when I go to /products. And so I define a route by saying the HTTP verb that needs to be invoked in order to get this route to be activated, and then the URL, which would be /products. And I want that to route to the products controller's index action. And I want to name this route, or have it be known as, the products route. So that's me specifying that when you get this URL using this verb, you have to run this controller action, and within the application it'll be known as the products route. And so at this point I can go to my server and I can go to /products, and I can get access to this, which you might wonder where this is coming from. This is the view code that is in my index.html.erb. So that's in the app views products index.html.erb file, which is what I said earlier is where this view is going to be associated. Notice we didn't have to do anything special to get that view to load. The default action at the end of running any action, we load up the view of the same names. So loads up the view of the same name after the action has executed. So in our case, that's going to be app views products index.html.erb. So in that, I want to actually display all of my products. So I might change this h1 to say like all products. And then here's where I want to actually display all my products. That's going to require a loop to loop through products that I want to display, and I also am going to have to get a collection of products to display. So we'll talk about, this is going to be sort of our first look at putting Ruby code into this html.erb file. And to practice that in the challenge, I had you try to edit a view such that the words chunky bacon would be displayed 100 times in the view. So we'll take a moment and we'll implement that. And we'll implement it like this. We'll go into Ruby mode is going to be any code that's found inside of these special tags less than % and % greater than. And so here I'm going to say 100 dot times do, and I'm going to pair that with an end here. And so these are two sort of distinct blocks. This is one block with an open and close. The end that matches that do is in a separate ERB block with an open and a close. Everything inside of here is can be just plain old HTML. So I could just drop in a paragraph tag that says chunky bacon inside of it. No need to echo it out in any kind of special way. It's just plain old HTML that's going to be looped here. And so if I go back to that view, you can see chunky bacon displayed 100 times. If I had some data, like Ruby kind of data, that I needed echoed out in here, so for example, if inside of my loop I captured my index as a block parameter, I could put that number, and have it echo out after chunky bacon. And I can do so with a embedded Ruby echo tag. So it looks like the other embedded Ruby tags, except for it has an equal sign at the front of it. And so here, if I have it echo out the I variable for every pass of my loop, we'll see that indexing variable come out beside the word chunky bacon. So now it's sort of a mixed mode of things happening inside of this loop. We're looping 100 times, dropping down paragraph tags for each of those 100 passes of the loop. But inside of that paragraph tag, I'm further echoing out the index I. And there's that index being displayed from 0 to 99. Okay, that's just a bit of an aside to give us an example of how we do this kind of embedded Ruby. What we'd actually like to see inside of here is going to be something like going to a products variable and looping over each of the products, calling each one product in turn, and then having an end statement associated with that. And then let's say within here, it might be nice for each product to maybe let's say inside of an H3, we echo out the product's title, and maybe inside of a paragraph tag, we echo out the product's description, and maybe all of that ends up inside of like a HTML section. If I try to run this code right now, of course, it's going to error because there's no such thing as products, but we might as well take a look at what a Rails error message will look like. This is the exception, the name of the exception that was caught. This is the controller in action that we're currently inside of. This is the file where the actual error occurred, so it's pointing to our index.html and telling us what line it occurred on. That line gets highlighted, and then we get the actual error message, undefined method each for nil class nil. So this products variable is nil. We tried to call each on it, and there's no such thing as each on the nil class object. Let's go make that object actually exist. The thing you don't want to do is to try to make it exist here inside of your view. So you don't want to do something like this, products equals, and then go talk to Vector Record and grab all of your products. That'll work. So I can see my two products here. But one of the sort of key tenets of this MVC division is that you don't want your model and your view to really know very much about each other, and you should never have direct calls to your model within your view. And so I'm going to remove this code, and it's going to end up in my controller is where it sort of belongs. So inside of this index action is where that data is going to end up. And then all instance variables that are defined inside of a particular action are going to be available to the associated view. So loads up the view of the same name after the action has executed. There's the view, and this view will have access to the @products instance variable. So I'm loading up all my products here and then displaying them in the associated view. So if I go back to my code, it'll look the same. I've got my two products. And at this point, I can now be sort of satisfied that I've got something going that is worthy of being checked into Git. So I can add it, and I can say implemented the products index action with associated view and route. Any question on that sort of process? This is the kind of process we'll be doing for all the rest of the actions. You basically, inside of the action, we interact with the model in the most cases, making particular bits of data available to ourselves by way of instance variables, and then the view is automatically loaded, and then we make use of any of the instance variables that we generated in our controller to do interesting things, like in this case, loop through all the products and generate HTML for each one of those products. So if we viewed source on the page that was generated, because we have two products, we should see two section tags, each with a H3 and a P inside of it. And there you are, we have our two section tags, each with an H3 and a P inside of it. And you can see all of that is inside of a fully qualified HTML document, even though that's not inside of our view. So that full HTML document, that can be found in the app views layouts folder. And each view gets injected at this line here where it says yield. If we wanted something to appear at the top of all of our documents, so let's say we had like a header that we wanted to be at the top of all documents that said, you know, my wonderful store. Now that I've put this inside the layout, that's going to appear on every single page within my system. My wonderful store. And if I start adding more than just this index, it's going to appear on those other pages as well. One other thing I might want to do, it's all well and good that, you know, slash products loads all of our products, but perhaps we want to have like a home page that does the same thing, just like the root of our system. We might want the root of our system to also load up all of our products. Right now, the root of our system loads up this welcome message. I can create a root route by just saying root and then where I want it to route to, and I'm going to have it route to the same place as slash products. I'm just going to say root will route to products index. And this root command is just a short form of saying that getting slash will go to the products index action as a route named root. So this is the long way of defining this. So I'll just leave the, maybe I'll leave this as a message. This root command is the following. Like that. By adding this route in here, I now have two routes in my system, and I can see both of those routes. If I go to my command line and I type rake routes, it's going to show me a listing of all the routes that Rails knows about and the associated controller actions that they're going to invoke, and as well as the HTTP verbs that will trigger them. So when I run this command, it's often a good way of sort of seeing what my sort of application knows about URL-wise. And so you can see I have this products route and a root route. They are both invoked on GET requests to two different URLs, but they both invoke the same controller in action. So now if I went to the root here and reloaded the page, I get that. And it's the same as going to slash products. They both do the same now. Get a lot of flexibility when you do routing in this way. You can see already we have some flexibility in that two different URLs route to the same controller action. Let's go a step further and do this show. Before I do that, I'll just step over to Git and I'll add that, commit it, added a root route for the products index action. So notice I'm going to get as often as possible. I don't want to get to a point where I can't describe the changes I made in one sentence. If I find myself typing a small paragraph for my commit message, well, I've waited too long to commit. My commits should be small, incremental snapshots of what I was doing and sometimes why I was doing it. And if we go back to this project, we'll see now I have 4 commits. And for you, when you're watching this, if you go to watch the screencast again, not only can you watch the screencast and see the final state of the code, but for any one of these commits, you can go and browse exactly the changes that I made during those individual commits. It shows in green the things that I've added, and if I removed anything, those would be shown in red. So it's sort of nice to be able to see sort of piecewise what's being added at each step. So now I want to create this show, and as I explained early on, I'd like it to be so that when I go to /products/some numeric identifier, that's when I want to show a particular product. And the numeric identifier I want to use as a primary key in the database to load up a particular product that has that primary key. So I'll start with a route in the routing file. And so I'll say a GET request to /products/ID, and I'm just using ID as a placeholder here. And it doesn't have any particular special meaning. I could call it something else. I'm just going to call it ID because that's what it represents, an ID in the database. And I'm going to have this route to the products show controller, and I'm going to say this route should be identified internally as the product route. So line these things up a little bit. My route is now in place. I should now be able to run my rake routes command and see it in my list of routes. I should also be able to go to my browser and type in the URL /product/any number and have it try to execute the show action and load the show.html.erb. That should all work right now. It won't show a product yet because I haven't coded it to do so, but it will show sort of the default content of the show.html.erb. And here you can see there's that show action right there. So if I go to my server, /product/some number, there's my show, and this is that H1 header coming to me by way of the layout. So inside of the show, it might be nice to replicate a little bit of what is happening inside of my index. This is going to be a bit of sort of repetitive code or repeated code, and Rails programmers are sort of big on don't repeating yourself. In future lectures, we'll learn how to remove some of the repetition that I'll be introducing right now. And so here I'm going to say on an individual page, we're still going to, inside of a section, display a product's title and description. And this time the product itself is going to be the instance variable. So if I tried to reload this page, I'm going to get an error because that product variable doesn't yet exist. But now I can make it exist inside of the controller here. I can say, well, I need a product. And just the simplest thing that'll work is just define the first one. This is not going to be correct because it'll always just display the first one. But now my code will at least run. So when I go to /product/1, I see goat cheese. When I go to /product/2, I see goat cheese. When I go to product/753 or some other number, it's going to show the same thing. So it's not yet using the ID as anything, and I could even put in like non-numeric IDs and still loading up the first one. So what I really want to do is I want to find, and when I run the find command, it allows me to pass in an ID, and the ID is going to come to me by way of my routing. I've said that the ID is going to be the symbol ID, and it's going to end up in a special system hash called params. And so params is just where HTTP stuff goes in Rails. So stuff from GET requests and stuff from posting of forms, they end up in the params hash. And so I'm going to go to params at position ID. And again, ID isn't a special word here. I could have called this something else, and then I just would have had to match that same something else there as well. So now when I go to a particular URL like /product/1, what's going to happen is that we'll invoke this route, which will run the show action. The show action will then find the ID from the params hash, go to the model, and find that particular product, save it into this products variable, and then display it within my view. So there's 1, goat cheese. 2 should now say cow cheese because that's product number 2. There's cow cheese. And 3, well, there is no third record in my database, so I get a record not found, giving me an indication as to where that happened. This is in development mode. If we eventually then finished with this system and put it up on the internet live in production mode, instead of seeing this error message, we would just see the Rails 404 page, which we could then customize however we wished. So Rails basically, when it sees a record not found active record exception in production mode, it just throws up the 404. Okay, that's basically the show action implemented. So we've done these 2 first actions, and they both, I don't need to save this file, they're both working, and they're both sort of the read from our CRUD tasks. That's sort of the easiest aspect of it. We'll now do a little bit more difficult. We'll go and do create. But before I do that, I'll lock down my changes with Git. Implemented the products show action with associated view and route. So the creation of a new product is going to be a 2-step thing. There's going to be one action that's in charge of showing a form, and the form will have an area where I can put in information for the title, the description, the price, and the stock quantity, and a submit button. And then when that form gets sent or posted, it's going to be posted to this create action, which is going to actually handle the actual creation in the database by way of active record. So I need routes. I'm going to say that I need a route called products/new that I want to go to the products new controller action as, and I'll let it be identified as new product within the system. There's actually an error in my route right now, but I'll go through the process of finding that error and then we'll fix it. So I'll leave it as it is right now, and then we'll see what the error is in a moment. Here I'll just make an indication. At the end of the show action, this loads the app views products show.html.erb. The new is going to load the app views products new.html.erb. And so this is where we want our form. And so I might say something like new product here. And if we were just doing HTML programming here, we would start building out a form. We would say like form, and we might set an action as to where we wanted this form to post to. And we might set the method as post, and then we might start doing things like putting inputs. But with Rails, we don't tend to code complicated HTML ourselves. We tend to go to helpers to build the form for us. So in this place, we're going to use a Rails helper to build our form. And so before we do that, I'll take a moment just to show a really simple Rails helper, which is one that builds links for us. So if you look at this idea of being able to go to this show page for each one of our products, that's sort of helpful, but it requires that our users are typing directly into the location bar, which we're never going to ask our users to do. It might be nicer if I could click on the titles of these products and then go to the full show page. And so I'm going to use a helper to build that link for me to implement links to the show pages. So that's on the index page. I want these titles to be links. And so I'm already echoing out the title. Now I'm going to echo out the output of running the link to method. The first argument of the link to is what the link is going to have for its link text. And the second argument is where it needs to link to. So I want it to link to, I've got a name for the route I want it to link to. The name is product. And so I want it to link to the product path. I always add underscore path. It's just one of the Rails conventions to the name of the route that I want it to link to. But I need something else because this route that it's linking to is this one here, and it has a placeholder in it. And so when this route gets built, I'm going to have that auto-populated with the IDs of each of the products that I'm linking to. And so I'm going to have to pass to the product path the actual product in question, which is this product here that I'm linking to. So now this link to command, it's going to do sort of the heavy lifting of generating an href for us. It'll generate one that goes to like /products/some ID. It'll put the correct ID in for us. It'll put some title, the title of the particular product, into the body of the A. It's going to do that for us. So I'm going to just go back to my index page. I've got these are links now. The first one links to the goat cheese page. The second one links to the cow cheese page. It's doing what I wanted. So that's our sort of first view of using a helper to build HTML for us. Now we want sort of a more complex kind of helper. We want a helper that will actually build a form for us. Oh, and I should also say, this is such a common thing to do, this product path, passing in the product. Rails will actually let us shorten that right down just to the object itself. And because the object is an object of type product, and because we've named the route product, it just infers that we want to go to the product path. So by shortening that, and I think I'll make even one more little addition here, because notice what I'm doing every time I'm going and then I have to click the back button. We probably don't want a website where we're forcing our users to click the back button. Maybe on this show page I should have like a home link somewhere. Home is my root. And so on the show page, let's just say below each one of these products, we could do a link to that says home that goes to the root path. And again, it's the name of the route with underscore path after it. And so now when I'm on an individual page, I can go back home for either of those pages. Okay. Git add dot git commit -m added links from the index to the show views and back. Okay, now we'll actually go about building our form, which needs to go here. There is a Rails helper that I can echo out, and it's called form4. And it's going to be for a particular object that I don't yet have access to, but it's going to be a product. And form4 takes a block, and it's going to give me access to a parameter which I'm going to call f, which is going to help me build sort of the innards of the form. So just doing this will start building a form for me. But if I tried to run this right now, of course, it's going to error because I don't have a product variable. So if I go to, I should make a link to it from the index page. So paragraph tag, I might do a link to new product, and this new is the new product path. So new product path, new product path, close, close, close. There's new product. When I first set up this route, I said that there was an error involved in it. And we're going to see that now. So the route looks pretty self-explanatory. Product / new should load up this new. But when I click on this new path, it tells me somewhat confusingly, it says it couldn't find the product with ID equals new. And it looks like it's trying to load up my show instead of the new. Why do you think it's doing that? Saying ID equals new and it's loading the show when I assumed it would be loading up the new.
Because it's taking the path from the browser and thinking that it's supposed to be an ID.
Yes, it's matching this route first, right? So it's seeing, I haven't told it that ID here is some number. It could be anything. It's really saying product / anything should load up the show and then use that anything to find on. I can get around that in two ways. I can add a constraint to this route, and a constraint would set it up so that IDs could only be numeric, and I could do that through regular expressions. Or a simpler thing to do, just to get a little bit further here, is to put the new route ahead of show route so it gets matched first. So if it's /product / new, go here, /product / anything other than new, go to the show. And now I get to the right place. I'm running the product's new action. I'm getting into the view, and here's where I'm trying to access this product variable that doesn't yet exist. So this needs to be an object of type product, but we're creating a new product, so it just needs to be an empty object. And so product is going to be product.new. So instantiate an object of type product, but don't put any details into it. The user is going to be putting those details in themselves by way of the form. If after this lecture you want to sort of review this process of creating this kind of stuff from scratch, if you haven't already, I would highly recommend going through this Getting Started with Rails guide. A lot of what I'm doing today is present in this guide. Do at least up to and including this whole section 5. Going further will be helpful, like section 6 and 7 and 8 are also quite helpful, but at least go up to and include 5. And you can see here at the beginning of 5, they're doing the same kind of stuff that I'm doing with Form 4. So now I've created a new product so that in new, that product exists, and Rails will try to build a form for me. If I go back to my page here, if I view source, we can see there's already a form in there. It doesn't have anything in it yet, but it's set up. It has a action attribute of /products and a method of post. So when you submit this form, it's going to post the data to /products. Which if we think back to what I was talking about here for create, that's exactly what I want. I want to have a post to /products trigger the create action. So that's good. The form also includes two hidden inputs. One is an input called UTF-8, and what it's really doing is it's putting in UTF-8 or Unicode character into this input, and it's seeing if when this form is submitted, if the same character comes back. It's basically just testing to see if the browser that's interacting with it is UTF-8 capable or UTF-8 aware. So it's just testing for encoding types. The second input is more for security or abuse purposes. It's a input that has a name of authenticity token, and it has this big long string as its value. And again, Rails is only going to accept this form if when the form is posted, it includes this authenticity token, which is the same string. And that's just basically because there's lots of hacking scripts out there that will sort of go around on the internet submitting stuff into forms to look for security vulnerabilities. And by default, they won't be aware of what your authenticity token is, so Rails will just ignore them. Now, you could write more complex scripts that if you knew you were attacking Rails websites, you could go and look at a Rails form, find the authenticity token, and then attack the website. But it's just one extra barrier to entry to protect forms from abuse. That said, we want to put more information into our form. We have a product that has a title, a description, a stock quantity, and a price. So for each one of those, I'm going to create a div. For each one of those, I want to build both a label and some sort of input. And so I'm going to use this f parameter that I get by way of my block. I can say f.label to build me labels. And I can say things like f.text field to build me text fields. And I want initially, say, a label for the title and a text field for that title. And maybe I'll do a new line in between them with a BR. So F is a form builder. It can build all the things that we might want inside of a form, specifically our form for our product. So because we have this empty products variable, it's sort of aware that this belongs to this product, I can go back to my page here, and there's the first sort of element of my form for the title. I can repeat that. I can repeat these 5 lines here for the description, for the price, and the stock quantity, and I can sort of update them. So I can say description right here. Instead of being a text field for the description, I'll make it a text area. The price will go here. I want a text field for that, that's fine. And the stock quantity can go here. And here. Not the most beautiful of forms, but it has everything I need. I also need a submit button. So I'll put another div inside of here where I echo out f.submit. And what am I going to submit? Well, let's say create product. That's what's going to appear on my button. Good. Okay, when I click this, it should now post to /products. And so I need a route to define that. That's what I was talking about at this point here. When we go to /products, by way of a post, we want the create action to be invoked. So I can do that right here. I can say, when I get a post, this is the first of my routes that isn't a get. When I get a post to /products, I want that to route to the products controller's create action. I don't even need to give this one a name because it's only ever used in conjunction with that form, and the form's already properly mapped to it. So I'm not going to be using this link. I'm not going to be linking to this with link to because it's a post. So it's not something I'm going to be able to link to with a URL. So all I need is that it's post to a particular URL, the product's URL, and which controller action to run. At that point, that means inside of this create action here, I need to actually do the work of creating this new product. So something along the lines of product dot new, and I need to get information about this product from my form. So I need to, supply a title, and I need to supply a description, et cetera, et cetera. Thankfully, what Rails has done for me with this form here is it's actually packaged up the title, the description, the price, and the stock quantity all up into a hash ready for use with product.new. And I can find it inside of my params hash at position product, the thing I'm creating. And so there will be, at position product, there will be a title in there. There will be a description in there. All of those things exist inside of the params at position product. So I just pass params at position product to new, and it'll pull out all that data and create a product that maps exactly to what the user asked for. And then I can try to create it. I can say if the product was successfully saved, and this is why I'm not going to have a view associated with my create action. If the product was successfully saved, I'm just going to redirect the user to the action called index. And if the product wasn't saved, I'm going to give the user the opportunity to fix up any validation errors that may have cropped up. We don't have validations yet, but I'll add them in a moment. And I'm going to do that by using the same view that the new action already uses. The new action uses this form, so I already have a form that I could use here. So if things go wrong in the create action, we'll just render out the form that's associated with the new. This should work. I'm going to get one error that's going to occur in between, and it's going to again be a security thing. By default, Rails isn't going to allow me just to create products willy-nilly from form parameters. I have to sort of do something to tell Rails how much access I want to give the outside world to the various properties of a product. But we can at least see it try. So here, this is it trying. I'm going to say title, shoe phone, phone built into your shoe, 45 of them. Clicking this will trigger the route for the create action. The create action will run, and I'm told that active model is worried about a forbidden attributes error. If we look at this Rails guide, we're going to see the same thing will have happened here, forbidden attributes error. In previous versions of Rails, we just went into the model and we specified inside of the model which model attributes should be accessible from the outside world. We had something similar to adder reader and adder writer that we have in plain old Ruby objects. We had this thing called adder accessible, and we sort of specified what was accessible from the outside world. These days, though, instead, we do that work inside of the controller. And so in my controller, I'm going to create a private method at the bottom of the controller. And this private method is going to define the parameters that I have access to, so my product parameters. And so instead of going to the params hash directly, I'm going to go to this product parameters. And here within it, I'm going to go into my params hash and say, okay, this is the params hash that is dealing with a product. And I want the user from the outside world to be able to set the title, the description, the price, and the stock quantity. So this means that from the outside world, the user cannot touch the created at or updated at. And if there was extra properties on this product that I didn't want to be accessible from the outside world, well, then they couldn't be set. That can be sometimes super important because say you had a user table that had a column that defined whether or not a user was an administrator. You don't want someone from the outside world to be able to set that isAdmin flag. And so if you had permitted like the isAdmin property within the permit, then someone would actually be able to submit a well-crafted form to your website that would then give themselves sort of admin privileges. And so we don't want that. So product params will now run this. It'll require that there's a product nested inside of the params hash, and it will give you access to the following properties within that. I should now be able to save this product and have us redirect back to the index action with that new product being listed. So here's that product again, create product, and there's that new product being listed in my index, and I can go and view its individual page. I can now check out my status, add, commit, implemented the product's new and create actions with associated views and routes. Push that up. Let's take a moment and have the saving of the product actually fail based on a validation. And so we'll go to our product and we'll add some validations for what it is to be a well-formed product. So I'll say validates. Let's validate that the title, the price, and the stock quantity are all required elements. So the presence has to be true. We'll say that the description's optional. We'll say that we want to validate that the price is a number. Numericality is true. Oh, I'll go sort of new style here. I've almost got my fingers trained to use the new style hashes. So numericality, which I'll say greater than or equal to 1 penny. And I will validate the stock quantity with a numericality again, where only integers are allowed. So I've got some validations now. That's what sort of I'm going to say that makes a valid product. Do not accept anything other than that. Okay, now if I go to create a new product and I just put in a title. So this isn't valid. I end up back at my form with the opportunity to type more information in. Now, it's not as nice as with scaffolding. I'm not listing any of my errors that have been produced, and it's not, it's not giving me an indication of what I need to be fixing. But I can add that as well. Let's just make sure that when I do put data in for the rest of this stuff, some description, some price, and some stock quantity. And this is valid now. It actually gets saved. Okay, that's good. We can go to the Rails guide probably on validations to see how to display the validation error messages. Displaying validation errors in views. And so inside of my form, at the top of it here, I might do something like this. In embedded Ruby mode, I might say if my product dot errors dot any question mark, meaning there are some errors. If there are, then display them. So using an if statement to test to see if there are any errors in this product object. If we're coming to this form for the first time by way of here, well, that'll always be false. If we're coming to this form by way of rendering it out, well, we're likely rendering it out because there are some errors, and so it should display them here and say here I'll just say there were some validation errors that prevented your product from being added. Still not super helpful, but at least a little bit more helpful. If I just come to this all on its own though, that message isn't there, so that's good. I can further, and again, I'm going to get this code from the Rails guide for validations. I can further even say how many errors. So instead of saying there were some errors that prevented this product from being added, I could say there were, and I could count those number of errors. And so I could get that by way of product.errors.count. There were 5 errors, it should say. I'll fix that in a moment. And then you got to worry about pluralization, because if there's a single error, you don't want it to say there was one errors. You want it to say there was one error. And so we have this wonderful pluralize method in Rails, where you can pass it a number and then the singular version of a word. And if that number is the number 1, it'll just output it in singular. And if that number is anything else, it'll output the pluralized version of that word. So here, there were 5 errors. If I put something in for each one of these, but I make my stock quantity a floating point number, so now there should be 1 validation error. There was 1 error singular. So that's good. And I can even list what those errors are. And so if I go to my validation guide here, inside of this block that I've been building up, if there are any errors, I can drop in an unordered list, and then for each of my product error full messages, I can display the message. So if there are any, tell the user how many there were, and then list them out in an unordered list of error messages. Stock quantity must be an integer. If I do things like remove some of these, it's going to give me a bit more information. Price can't be blank, it has to be a number. It's looking a bit more like scaffolding, although it's not as nicely styled. We can add styling, and we'll do that in a later class. Go back to Git. Added validations, and the display of validation errors in the new products form. That leaves us with 3 more actions to implement. The edit and update are going to work very similar to the create and new. So edit, like new, is going to display a form. Update, like create, is going to update the actual active record entry in the database. But they'll be a little bit different. Edit is not just like new, it's also specific to a particular entry in our database. So it's sort of like show combined with new. It needs to first find the product that actually is being edited and then load up the view that has the form that it needs to work with. So if we looked here, when I said that we're going to have an edit, I said we'll have it so that the URL will be /product/ID/ the word edit, so that we can be aware of which actual product is being edited. And so I'll go put that into my routes. I'll say a GET request to /product/ID/edit should route to the products edit action, and we'll call this edit product. And so that's going to have a form associated with it, and we're going to say that that form is going to use an HTTP patch request to the URL, which is /product/ID. So this is going to be another time where the URL is going to be the same as another URL that's already been routed to, but it's going to be different by way of the verb. So we had the products URL used twice, but with two different verbs. Now we're going to say when we get a patch, and I'll make this a bit like this, to product/ID, that needs to route to the products update action, and we don't need an as for that either. And then I'll just continue to line things up here. This is the first time I've ever made a patch route. In previous version of Rails, they were using the put verb, and then they've now decided that patch is the better of the HTTP verbs. Most web browsers only implement get and post. Web servers will implement get, post, put, patch, and delete. And so what Rails actually ends up doing is it sort of fakes out. If your browser can't support these routes, it fakes them out with JavaScript. So it actually interprets, like it'll intervene on your behalf when the form's being submitted, and it'll add a hidden input into that form that says, hey, I'm really a patch. It's a little bit hacky, but it does what it works with HTTP better than I've seen other products work with HTTP. I like how it sort of does what it's doing. Okay, so these are our matching routes. We can now go to rake routes and see that our routes are growing in size. We have a large number of them. We should now see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different routes when we run our rake routes command. And each one of them will have, well, most of them have names, they all have verbs, they all have URIs, and they all map to particular controller actions. Okay.
Okay.
And so, let's see. Now I need to implement some of these things. The edit page, it's going to be almost identical to the new page. And so I'm going to copy and paste it all in there. Now, again, this is like Rails programmers, like seasoned Rails programmers who would be screaming at me right now because the whole Rails mantra is dry, don't repeat yourself. And so now this is like a huge amount of repetition. And so in a future lecture, we'll look at how to remove the repetition that I'm now adding here by way of something called partials. But for now, we're just going to have this repetition be present. And so on the edit page, I'm going to say edit product. And then almost everything else will be the same. We have a form for a particular product. We have this code here for dealing with errors. We have all of this code here for dealing with the actual elements within the form. And then the submit button here, I'm just going to say update product. In my controller here, we're going to get routed to this edit if we come by way of this particular route, which has an ID in it. And so we can pull an idea from the show. I'll actually take that right out of the show. So that when we go to this edit, pull up the appropriate product by ID, so that when the form gets to be built, this product here has the data in it. So that data will actually be seeded into the form appropriately by way of this F form builder. And now I should link to maybe from the index page. For each one of these products, I might want to link to an edit link. And I called this the edit product path, I believe. Edit product path for this particular product. So if I go back to home, I've got an edit link for each one of these. And when I click on it, it loads up all of the contents of that inside of my form. Really nice. I didn't have to do any work to actually get that contents to appear. It's because the form that's being built is for this particular product object, and I've gone and grabbed that particular product object using the ID that's in my URL. So that's all I need to do for the edit. For the create, I'll make a note here, no views are rendered. We either redirect or render the new view. So that's not really true, that no views are rendered. I should say we either redirect or render the new view. And then for the edit here, this loads up the app views products edit.html.erb. And so when this form is now sent, it's going to be sending, or its action is /product/some ID, which is correct based on the route that we set up, /product/ID. But we hope that it's going to be a patch request. Now our browser only understands post, but hidden inside here is a hidden input called _method, which the value has been set to patch. So that's how Rails is sort of faking out the fact that this is a patch request and not a post. So that should work to actually do the updating. So now we've got here, and the data that is being updated is inside of our params hash. And so we want to update these attributes. I can say, I can find my product. It'll be the same line here. Find the product I want to edit by pulling in the params at position ID. And then I want to do an update attributes on it, which should pass or fail validation. So I can say update attributes. And the attributes I want to use are, again, these filtered parameters where I've sort of given permission for us to be able to change the title, the description, the price, and the stock quantity. So it's this product params that I want to pass in here. If everything goes well, let's redirect to the actual products page. So like the show page for that product. So let's redirect to the product. If it doesn't pass validations, well then we want to render out the edit view so that they can try again. So render edit. Let's see if that's going to do what we want it to do. Here we are at a product for editing. I can say edited, and I can put that in here. I can put it in here. I can change this number to have a 99 in it, and I can change this number to be 99 as well. Edited, edited. I'm not yet displaying the price yet, but it looks like my edit worked. If I go back and I edit that same one again, and I do something that fails validation, like I leave off the price, I should be given the opportunity to fix my error, put in a price, and continue on. And it always redirects to the product page. So the update's now been implemented, just like create. At the end of this action, we either redirect or render the edit view. And destroy is always going to redirect. We always redirect to the root after we have deleted. I'll capture my changes to Git. I'll make one further change though, because it's sort of bothering me that this edit doesn't look too related to everything here. Maybe I'll just Well, I'm not too worried about prettiness here. I'll just, at the end of every section, have a horizontal rule. Yeah, now it's at least somehow visually, you can see that this edit is paired with this one here. Okay, let's put a delete link right beside the edit, and then we'll be almost done all of our crud. So we've done everything other than this one here. And I said for this one, the URL in question, or the URI in question, is going to be a URI that identifies the member that we are actually going to destroy by ID, and it's going to be triggered on a delete request, and it's going to run the destroy action. So I'll go into my routing file, and I'll say when we get a delete, I'm going to make this a bit bigger here. When I get a delete to the product/ID URI, then I want to go to the products, destroy. Oh yeah, I haven't done my get yet. Git commit -m, implemented the edit and update actions with associated views and routes. My route is set up, so on receiving an HTTP delete at this particular URI, I will run the destroy action, and in my params hash, I'll have the ID in question, the ID of the product I actually want to delete. And so if we remember how deleting works in Active Record, I can go find my product by parameter. So find it by ID, and then product.destroy, and then redirect to the root path. Let's see if that works. I can't remember if I have access to root path inside of here or not. I should. And I need a link to it, so that'll be in the index here. Beside this link to, I will put a few things inside of the same paragraph. I will say link to delete. I'm going to give this a name. I'll say delete product. I now have a name, and I'll say the delete product path for this product. And then I have to tell this link that it's not just a regular old link. Because if it was a regular old link, when I clicked edit, or when I click it, if it was just a regular old link like this, it's not going to do what I want it to do. I can show you what it'll do. It's not going to be what we want though. When I click delete, for some reason it shows me my show page. And the reason is because a regular old link is always going to do a GET request. And so we've said that GET requests to /product/ID go to the show. So I need to tell this link that it's more than just a regular old link. It's a delete link. And so I have to specify that it has a method. I think I can just do method delete like that. So when I go home, let's get rid of this. This is valid. Now it's gone. It's done the deletion. And if I wanted to have like a confirm, I might say confirm, are you sure you want to delete this product? And now I'll have to actually reload my page first. Now when I click delete, it asks me, are you sure you want to delete this product? If I click cancel, it doesn't go away. If I click OK, it'll actually carry out the delete request. If we look at the source, you can see here, these links look a little bit different. A regular old link is just an A with an href. This delete has a data confirm with my confirmation message and a data method with delete. And Rails has JavaScript that's being loaded in this page, all this JavaScript here. And some of this JavaScript looks for links with data confirm attributes and data method attributes and augments them to be more than what they actually are. And so now I will commit these changes. Implemented the products delete action with associated route. And push that. And at this point, I'm pretty close to have replicated sort of everything that scaffolding did for us. I've got a index, a show, a new, a create, an edit, an update, and a destroy. I've got all of my CRUD actions. I've got views associated with most of those. I've got a view for the index, the show, the new, and the edit. And I didn't need a specific view for creation because it only uses a view if there's a validation error, and it ends up using the view associated with new. Same thing goes for edit. It doesn't need its own, or sorry, update doesn't need its own view. But if there's a validation error, it will render out the view associated with edit, which is this view here. And then delete never needs a view. It just redirects after it's done its deletion. It redirects back to the root path. So that's a lot to take in. As I said, to review all of this, I highly recommend working your way through the active record, or sorry, the Rails Getting Started guide, because that'll step you through everything that I've done today and more. And yeah, any outstanding questions or comments or concerns about any aspect of this, the routing, the controller, the working with the model, or working with the views? Yeah, Owen.
Back to the Rails console, is it possible to have a bunch of statements in a file and then process the file
Yes.
console instead of like manually typing in?
So to like seed your database with a bunch of data at say the beginning of it?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure what the sort of the state of the art is for that in Rails, but there used to be this seeds.rb file that you could set up in your DB folder, and it would just be a file that would include a whole bunch of active record create statements, and then you could run like a rake db seed or something along those lines, and it would run that file and it would populate your database with a bunch of set data for you. So yeah, look into that. I've done it with the seeding, and I think there might be a newer way to do it though. Anyone else have any questions? Our visitor, who? Yes.
That's one of his.
Sylvain, what do you got for us?
Redirect and rendering.
Yeah,
Difference exactly. I know one issues a request, the other one doesn't.
that's basically what it is. A redirect is actually going to send your browser an HTTP 302 status code with an associated URL saying that I want you as a browser to redirect yourself and make a whole new HTTP request to this provided URL. Whereas with rendering, it works as if we were at the end of a action and we were loading up the associated view. So like at the end of the show action, how we automatically load up this view. This is us saying, well, okay, at the end of this action, automatically load up this view. So when we say render new, it means go find the new.html.erb and render it automatically at the end of this action without doing an extra HTTP request.
Okay, so in terms of basic CRUD, I'm fine with, like, I get all that. Say I want a form that when it's filled, you press a button and it opens another form, like more information to fill. Am I redirecting to the second form, or am I rendering?
Oh, you could do it in multiple ways. So you probably, so you submit your form, that data goes to a particular controller action.
Yes, to a specific, and it populates a model.
It populates a model.
And open another form for another model.
Okay. Oh, I guess you could do it both ways. I would probably do it with rendering.
Okay.
Yeah, but you could do it both ways. The reason I would do with rendering is because if you did it with redirecting, then there's a chance that someone could just type in that path directly and get to a weird disconnected portion of your application.
Okay, okay. So that would.
Like they could step into the middle of the process if you just had a URL that you could do a get to that would take you to that form.
Yeah, by rendering, I don't need a route.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Right on. Any other questions or comments? All of this code's going to go up on GitHub. I've done a screencast of this of today's lecture, so the video will go up as well. So if you do have any questions afterwards, let me know, and I'll stop the screencast now.